Hello, welcome to the second video in a series of videos on spiritual enlightenment and astrology. This is the second in the series, but you do not need to go back to the first video and watch it before watching this one. This second video is going to be a very short one. I want to underscore one very important point that I introduced in the first video because it's critically important for appreciating the research and what we find is happening when people have a spiritual experience. And in part 3 I will get to the astrology and we will see the charts and we'll see exactly what's going on. But these preliminary thoughts are very important, and I just want to make sure this is clear. In that first video I introduced the word Agni, or at least I think I did. It means fire, and you can think of this fire not as just literally fire, but as a spark, the spark of life. David Frawley, a highly respected astrologer and teacher of Vedic astrology, describes how Agni functions at different levels. So the fire of life, the spark of the life force, works when we're digesting food. It works in our eyes, in our ears, in all of our senses. It works as prana, as breathing. It works in our minds. We get excited about ideas. It works at the level of oneness and the feeling of bliss and joy, of being part of life and of pure consciousness. So David Frawley presents this ancient philosophy about how the life force, the Agni, the spark of life, lights up in different levels. And it's this way of understanding spirituality as the life force igniting in different contexts, in different ways, at different vibrations, that helped me explain what's going on astrologically. So I want to thank my friend Elizabeth Cullen for the links to David Frawley's videos, without which I probably would not be making this series, because it's this idea that provides a foundation, a theoretical framework for understanding what we are seeing and what people are experiencing and what the astrology is at the time of enlightenment experiences. So if you close your eyes, I'm closing my eyes, we just see a kind of vague darkness, at least that's all I'm seeing, and then I open my eyes and wow, this flood of light and details of the world. It lights up, the life force is ignited. Same thing with our ears, all the sounds that we hear, the music, the birds, whatever it is. So the life force moves into a vibration, an experience, and a context in which it becomes engaged. And we're looking at these spiritual experiences as simply the life force moving into this level of bliss consciousness, of this joy of experiencing universality. Now, some people may not even believe that such a sensitivity exists, but it does. Okay, so this is the spark of life engaged in different contexts. And in the next video, we're going to see what's happening astrologically that triggers the Agni to move up into that state of universal awareness and the joy and bliss that comes with it. Also, in this third paragraph on the slide, think about how excited we become about an idea. So for us who love astrology, we get excited about our ideas in astrology. People get excited about all kinds of ideas in the sciences, the arts, music, whatever it may be. We get on fire about our ideas. That's Agni lighting up in the realm of the mind and intelligence. So you can just think of it that way. Where is your life force engaged? And so when we feel this oneness with all of creation, the spark of life is in what we can call a spiritual plane. But the thing to keep in mind, we call it spiritual, But everything is spiritual and everything is divine. So a person who is a master of literature is enlightened in the domain of literature. A person who's a master of painting is enlightened in the domain of painting. And that's not just a poetic or exaggerated statement, because as I went into more detail in the first part of this series of videos, everything is spiritual. And if you're doubting that, then do watch the first video, because it'll help make it clear and convincing that it's true. Now what I'm doing in the second video is just discussing how this really applies in real life and what we're looking at. So an athlete is enlightened in the domain of physical activity. And some of us who are spiritually inclined, we may look down at athletes like, oh, they're just moving their bodies around. Well, we can stop doing that. It's a kind of enlightenment, a high level of attainment in that domain of spirit. Okay, and a person deeply connected and engaged in the realms of bliss and pure consciousness is enlightened in those domains. Now, people who are very advanced, very sophisticated in any area, traditionally have been called gurus. A guru means the reverence for learning that we get from somebody who is more advanced. So we can have a music guru, a painting guru, an arithmetic guru for children. They're all gurus. The knowledge is sacred, the learning is sacred, and therefore the teacher is sacred. In the West, in modern times, we sometimes use the guru to focus more on the person, and the person is enlightened more than on the experience of learning. And it's really the learning, the opening of those doors to understanding, that's so beautiful and that's so treasured. And a spiritual guru is somebody who opens you up, helps guide you to that sense of being connected with all. That's the aspect of spirituality we're focusing on in this series of videos. So notice in this second paragraph here, excellence in literature does not indicate excellence in mathematics. Obviously, or athletics. Many people who are great in mathematics are not so good in athletics, vice versa. You could be good in both, bad in both, obviously. So when the light of Agni is at some particular vibratory level and engaged in a particular context, it does not necessarily spread to other levels and other contexts. That's obvious when we, in what I just discussed, math versus painting versus athletics. But it's also true, and this may not be so obvious, for the experience of oneness and divine bliss. It does not always spread out into the other levels. And we've had this feeling that if you're at the top of the ladder, you must have also mastered everything below the ladder. And furthermore, it's really not even the top of the ladder. It's just another place. They're all equally important. And again, if that doesn't sound quite right to you, watch the first video in this series, because I go into more detail and more convincing ideas about how that is true. So, third paragraph, consequently, many spiritual teachers abuse their followers. This is no more surprising than a great mathematician being poor in athletics. It is especially common because when you're immersed in this bliss consciousness, you tend to get detached from all the little things. Because, wow, you just feel like everything's beautiful, everything's one, and you can become less discriminating, less attentive to the details. And so you're not functioning very well in the level of details in personal relationships. So the detachment, this last sentence on this slide, this detachment from personal affairs that often comes with spiritual experiences, experiences of Agni moving into the plane of divine bliss. This detachment from personal fears can incline the spiritual teacher to manipulate things and feel emotionally insulated from experiencing emotional pain from bad consequences. So the spiritual person can sometimes be abusive and not feel bad about it. Now you might say, well, then they're not spiritual. Well, now you're using the word spiritual to mean high and mighty and perfected. I'm not using the word spiritual to mean high and mighty and perfected. I'm using the word spiritual to mean engaged at a certain vibratory level of bliss. Okay? So I just want to make this clear before we go on to the actual astrology of the experiences and what it is we're actually studying. So when we connect to Agni at what David Frawley calls ananda, the bliss and love, uh, and we feel connected to everything, you become more detached from little personal things, as I just said. Okay, now, so this process, this is another important point about what we're calling spiritual in the context of this understanding in astrology, which I go into the details of. No more background information in part 3. We do the charts, we see the configurations. But I think this is important. I just want to go over it. That the enlightenment process, the process of connecting to Agni at the level of divine bliss, is completely natural and normal. It's not fighting against the material world. It's a natural and healthy development. So I just want to emphasize that. As Yogananda says in one of his chants, I am the bubble, make me the sea. This awareness that we're little bubbles in the ocean of life is a natural awareness that develops as you mature. And ultimately you mature to feel this very emotionally and very viscerally how we are all one. Okay, so if the Agni is lighting up at these different levels, at the level of mind, so you can read and write, you can analyze things, you get excited about ideas, at the level of our eyes, if you're blessed to have good eyesight, your ears, it gets to, it's your digestion, your breathing, and let's just talk about the level of bliss, ananda level. Then the energy is flowing freely and it promotes good health, loving relationships, and fulfilling work. When the Agni is not lit at the level of bliss consciousness, you end up with the problems we have today, where people can be very intelligent, like scientists, and they develop engineering tools, they discover things, they develop all these beautiful plastics. What do we do with the plastics? We pollute the lakes and the rivers and the ocean, and we destroy our beautiful planet. Why? Because we have the intelligence, Agni, lit up in the mind, but not at the level of bliss consciousness. Because when you're lit up at the level of bliss consciousness, you're just not going to do those things. So the fullest level of health and positive functioning comes from being effective at all these levels, and every person is specialized and stronger in certain levels, and then you appreciate the contributions of people at other levels, the people who are the scientists, the artists, the spiritually developed, and so on. Okay. Now, a connection to the fire of Paramatma, or Agni, that does not flow into other levels, can lead to psychic ability. So if you're connected at this level of bliss and pure consciousness, your mind is working at a level of oneness. This can give psychic ability, intuition, things like that, but could be very poor functioning at very basic levels. And that's why you can have people who are highly developed in their sensitivity, but are not good at interpersonal relationships, critical thinking skills, etc. It all makes sense, doesn't it? Very, very simple. We just have to remove this habit we have of thinking that that spiritual level is going to fix everything. And the way that we have segregated out a connection with bliss consciousness to put it above everything else when it's really just another vibratory level and everything is spiritual. Okay, and as I mentioned in part one also, because everything is spiritual, earth signs do not prevent spiritual experiences. And that is a very exciting part of that first video where we talk about how earth signs are actually signs of transformation. So if you haven't watched the first video, I recommend it. There's some cool things in there as well. And what we're going to see in the third section, in the third part of the series, is that certain astrological vibrations do promote the experience of bliss consciousness. And we're going to see 7 vibration. Another vibration we're going to see is 43, believe it or not. I'll explain all that. It might sound mysterious right now. How these vibrations and how we see them in the chart do enable us to connect with Agni at the level of bliss consciousness. Okay, so this just repeats what I've already said. Agni at the level of divine bliss or pure consciousness can be called, quote, spiritual, but actually everything is spiritual. Matter is a very special form of spirit that we can interact with. Okay, and I showed this in the first video in this series, how the Agni becomes present everywhere, and we're not having to struggle upwards into spirit. All levels are equally important. Okay, now, also, just to emphasize this, I think it's clear, but spiritual enlightenment is not an end for most people. 1 or 2 contacts with bliss consciousness doesn't mean like, oh, gee, done, game over, moksha, enlightenment, the end, no more. We continue to advance, develop, and grow at all levels. Okay. And because, this second paragraph, just to emphasize this, because so many people are nearly completely shut down to a level of bliss consciousness, to even doubt that it exists, like we're just animals running around, fighting over things, that's what we are, and that's all there is. It's like it's just nothing's happening at the bliss consciousness level. At the level of mind, etc., it could be very highly developed, as I explained. So, because of that, we have this tendency to have any contact with bliss consciousness seems extraordinary, when actually it should hopefully become more normal everywhere. Okay, also, because so many spiritual gurus and spiritual elders are abusive, it's so common. Some people do not believe in gurus, they become cynical, they become hardened. But just remember that guru just means teacher, and somebody who helps you understand something. It now, it can be through a book, it could be through the internet. This we treasure. When when our bliss consciousness is awake, we treasure everything in life, realizing it doesn't necessarily have to be this way, and how blessed we are to have these opportunities. And one does not follow a teacher blindly. Guru doesn't mean leader of the pack, it means revered teacher. And just to give you an idea of this, Paramahansa Yogananda dedicated his very important book, Autobiography of Yogi, to who? This is a very important book. He knew it was going to be very important. It's his statement to the world. Who did he dedicate it to? Most obvious choice would be his own guru, but he dedicates it to Luther Burbank, a plant biologist. In fact, many people thought, well, this is weird. Some of his devotees and head people in Self-Realization Fellowship, this is well known, it's documented on their websites. They were just, whoa, what the heck? He dedicated this extremely important book to Luther Burbank and refers to him as a saint? Well, when you think of it this way, it makes perfect sense. Because Luther Burbank was enlightened in his work with plants. For an enlightened person, that enlightenment in the world of plants is enlightenment. The Agni is so developed, so engaged, so brilliant in that level of spirit. And Burbank lived his life as a saint. Saint means that you draw upon that level of oneness and universality into your daily life. So he didn't store up tons of money and, be greedy or none of that. Okay? So to live your life in tune with bliss consciousness is a saintly life and extremely beautiful. And bottom paragraph, we need gurus at all vibratory levels. We need them all. There's this tendency to think, oh, the spiritual guru, that's kind of replaces everything else. Once you get there, you don't need anything else. No, it's all spirit, it's all vibration, it's all frequency, it's all love. We need it all equally. Okay. All right. Well, I'm probably driving this too much. You got the point. All right. So here's some developments in recent years. People are emphasizing applying spiritual principles in your daily life. My dear friend Michael A. Singer's popular books, The Surrender Experiment and The Untethered Soul, he teaches how we apply our divine consciousness, we can call it, into our daily lives. And this is a wonderful thing to do because it integrates automatically your personal life, your daily experiences with that sense of oneness rather than segregating them out. So just thought I'd mention that. So I don't think I really need to summarize these key points. I think I've covered it all, but I'll just do it very quickly. Earth signs do not hold you back. As I mentioned in part 1 especially, the astrology chart is not like a crystal ball, as above, so below. It is showing the way. It is a roadmap. It's showing the way to our spiritual development. And here's a statement about that from Sri Yukteswar, who was Yogananda's guru. I'll read the quote. God is harmony. The devotee who attunes himself will never perform any action amiss. His activities will be correctly and naturally timed to accord with astrological law. After deep prayer and meditation, he is in touch with his divine consciousness. There is no greater power than that inward protection. So what Sri Yukteswar is saying is that as you become in tune with universal law, with the bliss consciousness and pure consciousness, and that is expressed in all of your life, then you become a free-flowing vehicle for the intentions that are trying to be expressed. So you do not contradict your birth chart, your astrology. You do not transcend it. You become it. Because the astrology is functioning from a higher dimensional level. Okay. So everything in the astrology chart is based on a higher dimensional, or you could say spiritual realm. This is one of the basic principles of vibrational astrology, is that everything in the chart is an expression of a higher dimensional realm. and showing the purpose in our lives. So the second house is not this heavy weight of material acquisitions. It's our attitude to tools and resources. The fact we have a body, the fact that we have tools. I can hold up my pen. It's a tool. We can type on our computers. Tools everywhere. Resources everywhere. The fact we have bodies at all. It's a resource, a tool. It's our attitude to all of that. So fundamental and primary. There's nothing heavy, materialistic, and weighted down about it. And when we think of the second house that way, all we're doing is projecting the worst traits on it. So this is a radically different idea about astrology, that behind everything in the chart, there's a light, a pure essence, a pure frequency that's trying to be expressed. So, let that settle in a little bit. Some people call the third house the lower mind. And when they say lower, they really mean lower, like not as good as the ninth house. Not true. They're all equally good and important. Okay. So I'll skip over this. We've covered everything, and this is just a final statement on the nature of spirit in everything. All electrons are identical. And in another quote from one of these chants in the book Cosmic Chants by Paramahansa Yogananda, in the forest thou art green, not meant just poetically, but in the forest you are green. Spirit is there. Anyway, you've got the idea. Matter is a very special form of spirit that we interact with. Okay, well, I hope I didn't bore you to death by going over that ad infinitum, but I said this was going to be short. I'm at 27 minutes already, but I just wanted to go over those points. Okay, maybe I overdid it. If I did, I apologize for that. But we are finally, at long last, ready for part 3. We're going to look at the charts. No more philosophy, no more background. Boom. Let's see what's happening when people have these spiritual experiences. We're going to see 7 vibration and some other vibrations. Okay, so that's it. Just closing comments. Resources for vibrational astrology, of course, the YouTube videos. There's nearly 400 of them now. The annual Vibrational Astrology Conference every March in Gainesville, Florida. It will be online if possible. It will be in person as well. It will be both if we can do both, but it will definitely be online as well. And for classes, there's AvalonAstrology.com, AstroSleuth.com, SiderealSoul.com. I think we're going to have another one pretty soon by different experts in vibrational astrology. That's it, my friends. God bless. Namaste.